US warships have docked in Trinidad and Tobago as the Trump administration increases military pressure on Venezuela and its president, Nicolas Maduro. It comes as Trump accused Maduro of being the leader of the organized crime gang Chendaragua, and after the US military carried out 3 more strikes on alleged drug cartel boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific Ocean last week. For more on this, I'm joined by Ecuadorian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Guillaume. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It's great to have you on the show. Guillaume, a US-guided missile destroyer docked in Trinidad and Tobago's capital. That was yesterday on Sunday. What is the significance of the warship in the Caribbean, and is it upping political tension in the region?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'd just like to say I'm not the current foreign minister, I'm the former foreign minister, so I won't be speaking for the Ecuadorian government, fortunately. But yes, it is a very significant military buildup. It's the largest military buildup in the Caribbean, the largest US military buildup in the Caribbean in decades, in contemporary history, essentially. And it's clearly so large that it has nobody fooled. Nobody's really talking about it being about the small boats that they're bombing. It's a much greater operation, seemingly aimed at Venezuela, as you rightly said, at regime change. We're now seeing further build-up with the arrival of an aircraft carrier, the largest aircraft carrier in the world, the USS Gerald Ford, which can accommodate 75 aircraft aboard. So it's a huge operation, which adds to the dozen ships or so, including destroyers, missile cruisers, nuclear subs that were already there, and a further, apparently, 5,000 troops to the already 10,000 troops that were on board these ships before the arrival of the aircraft carrier just a few days ago. So this is big guns. And it's, yes, it's creating a lot of tensions in the regions, with obviously Venezuela protesting the build-up, but also some of its immediate neighbors. Colombia has been protesting the build-up, and this has led to a backlash from the Trump administration against the Colombian government, which we've seen in the last few days, with sanctions being imposed on the Colombian president. But also Brazil, one of the largest states in Latin America, complaining about this. It doesn't want, Brazil's a neighboring country of Venezuela, and it doesn't want a war, which would probably create a huge humanitarian crisis, and a number of other states. We've also seen Barbados, a much smaller player, but complaining, but others aligning more with Trump, including Trinidad and Tobago. So yes, US military buildup fostering lots of divisions, lots of political tensions in the region, for sure.
And Guillaume, President Nicolas Maduro says the US government is fabricating a new eternal war against his country. But the Trump administration argues they are targeting the narco-socialist Maduro regime. But my big question, and I think the question that many people are wondering right now, is what is the motivating factors for the US? What's really behind this? Is it regime change, or is there a lot more to this story?
Yes, I think, well, it's primarily about regime change. And I think there is a broader historical strategy there, which is about reasserting US power in what it considers to be its backyard, the Western Hemisphere. But in the short term, it's regime change in Venezuela for sure. This is actually not a new policy. It's been a long-standing policy of both Democrats and Republicans. Particularly the first Trump administration was very keen on regime change in Venezuela. You may recall the whole parallel presidency of Juan Guaido, which ended in 2023. It was pretty much a fiasco, but that was a strategy of the first Trump administration. There was also a US-supported coup in 2019, which failed, and then a 2020 mercenary invasion, which also failed. So regime change has been an ongoing policy, but this is the first time that now military intervention is being brandished as a new way of doing regime change. It's a big escalation, right? It's not just covert operations and supporting insiders or military figures that might lead a rebellion. This is like threatening airstrikes, and we don't even know, maybe even boots on the ground. So I think it's really upping the stakes. I think it's particularly led by what are considered to be the hardlines in the Trump administration on Latin America, the hawks, if you like, Secretary of State Marco Rubio being the leader of them, who has been behind regime change in Venezuela for a number of years, has failed so far. The Venezuelan military has been remarkably loyal. And so the next step up is, well, military intervention. Narcotics, I think most across the political spectrum, really, most analysts agree that narcotics has little or nothing to do with the story, because most of the narcotics actually don't come from Venezuela, but come from elsewhere.
And it's really interesting because you mentioned something there to me, and I was just wondering, do you think that a land invasion of Venezuela is possible and imminent?
I mean, it's possible because obviously the US military is unrivaled, clearly, by the Venezuelan military. We're talking about in any conventional exercise of warfare, there would be, I mean, the Venezuelan military, I think, wouldn't stand a chance. Now, whether this would be strategically sound for the United States to do this, I really think this would be a massive political and military quagmire. You know, I mean, there's of course, the Venezuelan military, but there's also militias. The Chavista, which is the political phenomenon inherited by former President Chavez, it's been weakened in the last few years, but it's still very real and very strong. And it would be the first time in history that the United States invades a South American country. There have been many invasions in history of Central American countries and Caribbean states, but these are much smaller. They're close to the United States. They're considered as a sort of typical backyard. We don't like this term in Latin America, but it is a term that has been used pejoratively. But South American states tend to be larger. If you think about the last US invasions in Latin America, it's Panama, 1989, 1990. This is 2.5 million inhabitants. Venezuela's 28 million inhabitants, which is the same size as Iraq back in 2003, which is not exactly a very sort of good memory for the US, right? So we're talking about larger states, larger populations, jungles, big cities, likely urban warfare and rural guerrilla warfare. This is not a good thing from the perspective of the United States to get involved. So in the early days, would the US take out kind of strategic military assets of the Venezuelan government? Probably, yes. Of the Venezuelan military? Probably. But in the long term, is it feasible? I don't think so. And historically, it's never been done. We've never had US troops on the ground, uninvited. We have military bases, but uninvited invasion of the South American landmass and its 12 sovereign states. That's never happened. And I think there's a reason why that's never happened. It's a very big undertaking.
And it's really interesting because I hear you talk there and I always think about Donald Trump and his America First policy and not to get involved in forever wars not close to the US. And that's something that was spoken about a lot in his campaign and in his second term. But I just want to move on to the fact in recent weeks, the US has conducted several deadly airstrikes on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean Sea. What information do we have on who these targets are and if they were actually carrying drugs? Is there any solid information out there?
So no, the quick answer is we have no information. The United States has provided zero information on who these people are and whether they're carrying drugs. And if they are carrying drugs, they're very likely to be, in the event they're carrying drugs. And a lot of people, again, are saying not necessarily. And if they are carrying drugs, you would imagine that it would be in the US's interest to detain these people who may have information that are very likely to be very low-ranking members, not even members, maybe just quick hires for the cartels, right? So they're very uninteresting in terms of hits, where what you would expect the United States to want to go much higher up the ladder of the cartels and to therefore detain these people, obtain information, obtain quality intelligence, which is what the United States would normally do in order to go higher up the ranks and get go to the real drug barons and the leaders of these gangs. So it's very suspicious. And of course, that's one element. But the other element is that we know that most of the cocaine, forget the opioid crisis in the United States and fentanyl and so on and so forth. None of that is going via Venezuela. But most of the cocaine is also not going via Venezuela. There is some, undoubtedly, cocaine that is transiting through Venezuela. Most experts agree that this is marginal, and most of it is going to the United States from the Pacific coast of Latin America, of South America specifically, from Ecuador, mainly from Peru. So it's mostly Colombian cocaine going south into Ecuador and into Peru, and then exiting the South American landmass via these Ecuadorian and Peruvian ports. But a huge majority of the cocaine is coming out in actually quite large ships, in sort of shipments of major commodities that are being exported by plantations, mostly bananas actually, not on these small makeshift boats, right? So there may be some, but it's marginal. So if the United States was really going after drugs and drug barons, you would expect them to intervene on the Pacific side, to have, to go after much larger stakes rather than these relatively small stakes we're seeing in the Caribbean.
And just before I let you go, one quick thought. Is Ecuador doing anything to control these drug cartels?
Well, it's an interesting question. It's a polemic question because quite a lot of drugs has been found in banana shipments, as I've just said. Now, the Ecuadorian president is the largest banana export in the country, and a number of shipments of cocaine have been found in banana boxes that belong to his companies that he owns, that are basically plantations that he owns. Now, of course, the government and the president himself have argued that the drugs have been planted there, that it has nothing to do with him, but it's been rather repetitive. So again, if the Trump, and it so happens that the current Ecuadorian president is very allied to the Trump administration, right? So, you know, the question is, yeah, I think is valid, is relevant. I mean, if the Trump administration was really going after the drugs, wouldn't they want to sort of start investigating what's going on in Ecuador and the banana plantations and the banana boxes? And we're talking about a large tonnage of cocaine going through those banana shipments. So I think a lot more could be done. I mean, of course, the war on drugs is a historic failure. We don't have to go in detail to cover the story, but going back to Nixon's declaration in 1973, Reagan's declaration in 1986, we still face the same problem. Drugs are still entering the United States, so there's a much deeper problem here to be dealt with. Much of it has to do with money laundering. Another big section of this is to deal with demand in the United States, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of ways in which the Trump administration could be trying to curtail drug consumption and drug imports. But I would argue on that list, Venezuela's very far down. Ecuador's probably further up, but there are many other things that the United States could be doing.
Former Ecuadorian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Guillaume, it was fascinating speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time.